To call the meeting to order, and pursuant to the order of reference received from the House on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016, the committee will resume its study on M39, Immigration to Atlantic Canada. And part of our first panel today, we have Ms. Elena Lockhart, the Member of Parliament for Fundy Royale. Welcome. From Acadia University, we have Ray Ivani, the President and Vice Chancellor, and he's by video conference. Welcome, Mr. Ivani. And from Thank you. And from the TD Bank Group, we have the Honourable Frank McKenna, the Deputy Chair. Welcome to everyone, and I believe, Ms. Lockhart, you begin with 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of this committee for studying this issue, for hearing the full testimony of expert witnesses who are traveling great distances to make a difference for Atlantic Canada. I also want to thank each and every member of the House of Commons who voted in favour for this motion last November. The very fact that the House of Commons was unanimous in its support for this issue proves to every Atlantic Canadian that the region, culture, language, history, and society is important to all Canadians. I'm often asked why I chose to focus on immigration as a topic for my private member's motion. It's a valid question, as I do not hear from constituents each day looking for more immigration. However, what I do hear about is their daily concerns about the sustainability and growth of our communities and the local economy. Constituents tell me they are concerned about their rural schools, their corner stores and communities closing because of a lack of volume, and the dwindling memberships in organizations, just to name a few. At the same time, business owners in the trucking, tourism, home care, and manufacturing sectors are talking to me about the challenges they face when hiring and how it is limiting their potential for growth. As a former human resources professional and a business owner, I have experienced the effects of a shrinking and aging population. These challenges are symptoms of a larger problem, one that includes lagging immigration numbers to Atlantic Canada relevant to the rest of Canada. As you heard in Ms. Hunter's limited testimony last week, in 2014, 6.7% of the Canadian population lives in Atlantic Canada, but the region only welcomed 3.1% of new immigrants. We have passed the point where we can repopulate without intervention. We will not naturally become a younger society again. Our workforce will not naturally expand. Investments will not come easily to our region if we stay the course. Is immigration the magic bullet? No, but it is an important part of a larger strategy to revitalize Atlantic Canada and ensure sustainability for the future. In addition to the immigration pilot program, the Atlantic Growth Strategy focuses on 4 other areas of action: innovation, clean growth and climate change, trade and investment, and infrastructure. Together, the federal and provincial governments are playing the long game, sustainable prosperity in Atlantic Canada for generations to come. I would like to think that my motion, as well as the work of all 32 MPs from Atlantic Canada, is reflected in the government's consistent support and action to enhance Atlantic Canada's economic performance. Considering the announcement of the Atlantic Growth Strategy, after I had tabled my motion, but before the House could debate it, I called for an amendment that would focus on the committee's work on an examination of retention and settlement, with the view of bringing forward recommendations and best practices. The amendments to the motion broadened the scope of the study. They did not significantly narrow the scope of the motion as was debated. By concurrently studying factors of retention, the committee will not only be studying retention flowing from the pilot, but would also help contribute to the success of the pilot and to improving retention in other provinces and territories. This government has taken steps to increase immigration, but that is only the first step. We need them to stay and we need them to prosper. The committee is now undertaking a study that I hope will identify problems with the process, including barriers within our bureaucracy and best practices for successful recruitment. Attention should be paid to successful integration of new immigrants and ways to ensure that success by engaging businesses and offering settlement and integration support. By studying factors that increase the retention rates of newcomers, the committee would not only contribute to the success of the government's pilot, but also would provide a point of reference for best practices. The practices can then be shared across Canada, knowing that national demographic projections show that all regions in Canada will be impacted by an aging population. Atlantic Canada is facing that impact first. Strong and effective retention measures will help ensure that Atlantic Canada remains a region of choice and are likely the key to maximizing social, cultural, economic, and community benefits of immigration. This is a critical call to action as Atlantic Canadians look for ways to achieve a more prosperous future, a future that allows for the repatriation of our youth, economic growth, and the sustainabilities of communities throughout the region. I'll end with this, Mr. Chair. When Atlantic Canada does better, all of Canada does better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Mr. Ivani, the floor is yours. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My perspective on this is shaped by my experience as chair of a commission in Nova Scotia. Began in 2012, reported in February of 2014. We were asked by the provincial government to take a in-depth look at the Nova Scotia economy and our prospects for the future. And we were also asked to engage Nova Scotians in that process. So we had 2 rounds of province-wide consultations. And when we began that work, we looked at the data sets surrounding both economy and demography. And of course, just like every other part of Canada, our economic history has always had those 2 things combined. I hail from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and of course, during the years of the development of the steel mills and the coal mines, there were waves of immigration. And so those 2 things have always been linked. The issue became more pointed, however, when we extrapolated from a baseline year of 2009 and looked at a projection, assuming that the same patterns prevailed in terms of net interprovincial migration, immigration levels, etc. If the same trends prevail and we push that out 25 years, it really painted a very, very stark reality, which I'll share with you. And that was that Nova Scotia's overall population would decline somewhere in the order of 4%. Unfortunately, the 18 to 64-year-old cohort, which is your labor market, would decline over that same period by between 15 and 20%. So we looked across the world, frankly, at subnational jurisdictions, provinces, that had experienced even a fraction of that kind of labor market compression. And there was no productivity or innovation, compensatory economic lift that could accommodate that kind of contraction in the labor market. So demography in this case is not simply a tracking of age. It is a fundamental change to our provinces and the region's ability to be successful on a long-term basis. And, you know, the Canadian demographer David Foote has often reminded us not to be surprised that people get 1 year older a year at a time. But when you reach the point, as Ms. Lockhart indicated, when you reach the point of a demographic pattern in Atlantic Canada, which is a bit of a precursor to what will happen in other areas of Canada, with this kind of age weighting, it fundamentally changes everything. And from our perspective, we set in our Economic Commission report a set of 19 goals, and it wasn't by accident that the #1 recommendation in our report called for a tripling of immigration numbers in Nova Scotia. And while that may seem a bit of a stretch goal, especially given where we were at the time in 2014, I'd remind the committee members that that number corresponded to Nova Scotia's per capita share of the immigrant landings at that time in Canada. So there needs to be a focus. Obviously, the economic linkages are equally as important, but the track record, I think the committee is aware, the track record of immigrants in Canada generally and in Nova Scotia specifically is very, very positive with respect to the employment levels, respect to educational attainment levels higher than the Canadian population, and in starting their own businesses and having those businesses succeed over periods of time. So our belief is that there does need to be a concerted focus on immigration, particularly with the dynamics in Atlantic Canada, and that acting in concert with the kind of elements of an innovation agenda, the startup success that we've seen, particularly in the Halifax area. But frankly, this is a circumstance, and I believe now what I did in 2014, which is without significantly enhanced immigration capacity, it is going to be an exceedingly challenging economic future for Atlantic Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Ivani. Mr. McKenna, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to be with you.
And flattered to be asked to be here as a witness, and especially with my good friend Alana Lockhart, who I give full credit to for inspiring this effort, and Ray Ivany, of course, who's a subject matter expert who's well respected in our region. They've said exactly what I want to say, so I'm going to go further and be much more provocative in what I say. I don't have the expertise, but I am motivated by living in the region, having eyes in our region, and lifelong passion for the place of my birth. And I can only be helpful, I think, if I get right through to to what I think are the real facts. We can't do justice to the issue of immigration in Atlantic Canada without dealing with the issue of temporary foreign workers and unemployment insurance. They are all inextricably linked. So let's frame up the problem. It's not overly apocalyptic to say that if demography is destiny, Atlantic Canada is in a slow-moving death spiral. And the facts, I don't think, should be in dispute. 10% of Canadians used to live in Atlantic Canada in 1966. Now it's 6.6%. The 2015 Stats Canada numbers that came out showed that New Brunswick, for example, had sustained more deaths than births for the first time since statistics were tracked. The region as a whole had the second lowest fertility rate in Canada. We've lost over 40,000 people in the last 30 years. The population isn't just leaving, as we heard, it's getting older. Atlantic region has aged twice as fast as Alberta since '71. The average age now is 8 years older than Alberta. Just this week, Stats Canada had even more alarming numbers. The slowest growing part of Canada is Atlantic Canada. New Brunswick was the worst in the country, and the only province that had a negative growth rate. Nova Scotia right behind it. St. John, New Brunswick was the only city in Canada that lost population over the last 5 years. And so we're seeing the consequences play out in this never-ending death spiral. Aging population costs more. Declining population base results in less equalization, fewer transfers for health and education, less money from income tax, less money raised from consumption tax, and then we have to care for an aging population, which is exponentially more expensive. The results are starkly visible. Universities struggling for students. Our high schools are sometimes half full. And, of course, everybody's fighting to keep their school full. And we have bed blockers in all of our hospitals. Now, that vicious cycle is self-perpetuating. Provincial deficits are soaring. And in a desperate effort to staunch the bleeding, provincial governments have compounded the problem by increasing consumption taxes and marginal tax rates to the point where taxation capacity is really at a limit in virtually all of our provinces. Even worse, skilled workers commuting to the West may conclude at some point it makes more sense to move there and enjoy lower tax rates than continuing to live at home. To compound the problem for the provinces, all of the levers are held by the federal government: employment, insurance, immigration, temporary foreign workers. So let's start with immigration. Atlantic Canada in particular, and much of rural Canada in general, have trouble attracting immigrants because we don't have a base of immigrants. Immigrants go where immigrants are. They want to be part of a community. We don't have those communities in large measure. That's why 70% of immigrants in Canada go to Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. 65% of all immigrants end up in Toronto. Toronto's booming, cranes in every corner, and that's a good thing for Toronto, but we don't have that jet fuel in our economy. Public policy supports those centres that have critical mass. When's the last time you saw an immigration minister from Atlantic Canada? Facts are facts. Atlantic Canada only receives about 2.5% of immigrants. We're not getting our fair share. And without a larger base, we can't get the critical mass in order to attract more immigrants. It's a constantly reinforcing negative cycle. Now, increasing immigration to Atlantic Canada, I want to say clearly, is not without controversy. Even the citizens of Atlantic Canada are less than enthusiastic about increased immigration. They often say to me, why the hell do you want to keep bringing people in? We don't have jobs for the people that are here. A glimmer of hope, I think, has emerged in the recent Syrian refugee crisis. Atlantic Canadians welcomed a disproportionate number. A lot of that was humanity, but a lot of it was some kind of latent recognition that we've got a big population problem. So what does all this mean? It means Atlantic Canada not only has an aging and declining workforce, but a dramatic shortage of skilled workers. Chronic shortage of willing workers to fill the jobs available. And while we fix the problem, we have to fix the hemorrhaging, which brings us to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. That program is desperately needed for everything from machine operators to production workers, hospitality workers, whatever you might think. Thousands of jobs are at risk of going unfilled and production being shipped out of the region due to a lack of employees. This is not an idle threat. Changes made to the program a couple of years ago resulted in a crisis in our communities, hundreds of jobs being shifted out of the region. So the provinces and employers are caught in a cruel bind. Even though on paper unemployment is high, they have no control over the employment insurance system, and they can't find enough workers to satisfy the labor force requirements. A suspension of the Temporary Foreign Workers Program would put at jeopardy at least $1 billion in the seafood industry alone. So that brings us to the third piece of the conundrum. With unemployment across the region close to double digits, how could we possibly have a shortage of workers? Well, here's the dirty little secret. For many, employment insurance has gone from a trampoline to a trap. A percentage of chronic recipients have become so addicted to the opiate of unemployment insurance that they eschew full-time work. Seasonal nature of part of the Atlantic economy exacerbates the problem. Employment insurance de facto has become a guaranteed annual income program for seasonal industries. It's fact. In spite of well-meaning efforts from successive federal governments, the problem is getting worse, not better. Decades of chronic dependency have atrophied the skills of this workforce and destroyed their resolve to work. The drug of unemployment insurance has sapped the strength of many in our economy. It's avoided tough mobility decisions, promoted poor work practices by employers and employees alike. We haven't seen the political will at the federal level to do anything about this. In New Brunswick alone, about $800 million is paid each year in employment insurance payments.
20 seconds, please.
So decades of VI have left these workers without skills and motivation. You can't blame the victims. They've taken what's on offer. So what I'm suggesting that we need is that we need a three-pronged approach. Deal with employment insurance for new entrants, try to create case plans for them to work them into programs of learning, education, etc. Continue with temporary foreign workers in order to fill the current gap, and deal with the problem of the immigration program. We need a larger share of the pie than we're getting at present. I'd be glad to give some suggestions on that as we get to questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. McKenna. Mr. Harvey, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. McKenna, for being here with us today, and I think you offer a unique perspective as somebody that's, been a strong advocate for Atlantic Canada, public servant, somebody that's worked in the private sector. It gives you a more well-rounded view of the picture that we have in Atlantic Canada, and as somebody that's worked in private industry my entire life before running for public office, I've accessed the Temporary Foreign Worker Program in Atlantic Canada, and I've used it in a processing industry. And I recognize, from my point of view, I've long said that I don't believe there's a direct correlation between the unemployment area in a specific geographic region and the need in that region for temporary foreign workers or an immigration stream to fill the roles that are required by industry. And I think a lot of that speaks to what you spoke to with a lack of skills development because of decades of declining population and lack of industry. So I'm just wondering, how do you see the federal government's role in working with the provinces and working with the private sector to push this agenda of immigration in Atlantic Canada? Where can we be the most effective in trying to recruit and in terms of recruiting and retention in keeping those workers in Atlantic Canada once we get them there?
Yeah, I'd say retention is part of our own problem. Communities, province and associations have to work harder at that. At the retention, we have to lay down a base. I would say as well that a lot of things are starting to work now. The Atlantic Growth Strategy is part of the solution to the problem. This new Atlantic immigration pilot is a big step in the right direction. We need more, much more along the lines of the pilot project. We need more entrepreneurs coming. We need people who come who don't have a job, but will create a job and create hundreds of other jobs, the way you see all over the rest of Canada. We need people like that. We need a path from our universities so that somebody who's a graduate, and I'd say 20% or more, Ray would know, of our university graduates are international students. We need to allow them to stay in our region for some years after they graduate and put together business plans and create new industries. We need all of that.
And do you think...
And a path, by the way, for temporary foreign workers. Somebody who's been in our community working for 4 or 5 years, knows the community, likes the community, and is probably the best bet to be retained in the community. Absolutely.
And I know from a transportation perspective, we certainly see in Atlantic Canada a lot of transportation drivers that are coming in here and they're working, they're auto-enrolling in the immigration stream with the full intent of immigrating here over the long term. So I completely agree with you that it becomes a more long-term strategy for immigration. Do you think that a more holistic approach to addressing some of the issues that we have in Atlantic Canada through the Atlantic Growth Strategy, along with immigration, so addressing some of the other symptoms in terms of economic growth and innovation, is the proper path? Do you feel that the Atlantic Growth Strategy targets the areas that we need to get to?
Yeah, look, I think it's all going in the right direction, but it is a chicken and an egg thing. A lot of people would say, let's not bring immigrants till we have jobs. But in many cases, immigrants are the people who create the jobs, and they enrich our communities and enrich our populations and our workforce. So we've got to have all of these things firing at the same time. If you land last week I announced 600 jobs in Moncton. I know that we cannot fill all of those locally. We're going to have to bring people from across Canada or people from other countries in order to fill them. We need all of these efforts working together, in my view, in order to succeed.
Thank you. Before I run out of time, Mr. Ivany, from your work studying this issue, what specific streams of employment do you think immigration can help us address in Atlantic Canada, and what specific skills do new immigrants or newcomers coming to Atlantic Canada possess that we might not have in our regular workforce in Atlantic Canada? How can they complement the workforce that's already existing?
Yeah, I think it's virtually across the board. So you're going to get some immigration that is triggered off of very rare and specific skill sets. I agree also with Mr. McKenna. I think we've long seen an entrepreneurial drive in immigrants, so it won't necessarily be skill set related, except that the skill set is to actually create a business that will create employment for Atlantic Canadians. So I think what we've seen is a better matchmaking. And this is an area where, frankly, the provincial government and the federal government, I think, need to work hand in glove. I know our immigration unit here in Nova Scotia has been very, very aggressive, has met or exceeded all of their targets, and often it's the point that you raised, Mr. Harvey, it is the matchmaking between an individual company looking for a specific skill. And remember, their requirements are to determine that they can't find a Canadian for that job. And then the immigration department helps match them up with someone coming through one of the streams. We heard criticism, I'll be candid with you, during our work, that oftentimes the federal government presence in trying to do this matchmaking often amounted to a 1-800 number. And frankly, that's not good enough. There needs to be a federal immigration office presence, I think, in all of the Atlantic Canadian provinces that can, again, work very closely with the provincial departments to, again, get this elegant fit and match between opportunity and an individual immigrant.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ivany. Before I run out of time, I want to just ask Mrs. Lockhart, you spoke in your opening comments about the unanimous support received last fall for the motion in the House, and, what type of signal do you think that sends to Atlantic Canadians and to New Brunswickers at the same time, that we were able to pass that in the House? What kind of message do you think that sends to Atlantic Canada?
30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I think that was a very strong signal to send to Atlantic Canadians that the whole House of Commons recognizes that there's an issue, and I was very pleased to see, across parties that we need to look at this and make sure that we do have a concerted effort. So I think it was a very strong signal how important Atlantic Canada and the prosperity of Atlantic Canada will impact the prosperity of all of Canada.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Ms. Rumpel, 7 minutes. I understand you'll be splitting your time with Mr. Tilson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lockhart, we've heard a lot of testimony to date about the need to ensure a strong economy in Atlantic provinces to have a sustainable driver for immigration over time, and certainly to see retention. Would you agree with that characterization?
Absolutely. I mentioned that in my opening statement, that this needs to be part of a bigger plan. Immigration on its own will not solve the problems of Atlantic Canada, but when you have businesses that are telling you that it's a barrier for growth, then we really need to look at it. And I think, as you said, we've heard lots of testimony today and in our other testimony that this is in fact the case.
Were you aware of a Conference Board of Canada report commissioned to look at the economic analysis of the Energy East pipeline project? In that report, it stated that there will be over 3,771 jobs created by this project for New Brunswick specifically, and it looks like close to $1 billion in tax revenues created for New Brunswick. Were you aware of that report?
Not that report specifically, but I'm aware of the impact of Energy East, the potential impact.
Excellent. In February of last year, a motion was before the House which said, given this time of economic uncertainty in the House, the House, A, recognized the importance of the energy sector to the Canadian economy and support its development in an environmentally sustainable way. B, agree that pipelines are the safest way to transport oil. C, acknowledge the desire for Energy East pipeline expressed by the provincial governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick. And D, express its support for the Energy East pipeline under consideration. How did you vote on that motion?
I did not vote for that motion. As you are aware, right now the Energy East project is being reviewed by the NEB. We've been very clear that, obviously our government supports getting our resources to Tidewater, but we need to do it in a responsible way, and there was a process in place.
So if the NEB rules in favor of that project, will you support it?
Yes.
So how do you feel about other pipeline projects, such as the Gateway project, which was approved by the NEB yet politically overturned by the government?
Well, I think the government needs to make decisions on an individual basis with individual circumstances. Clearly, the Energy East project is one that potentially has more impact for Atlantic Canada, so that's the one I've been focused on. But yes.
So it's okay for the Energy East pipeline to be approved and go forward, but not the Gateway project to be overturned by the government.
That's not what I said. What I said was, or what I intended to say, if I didn't make it clear, was that there is a process, and we respect the process. I respect the process. If that process deems that Energy East is a good project and the recommendation is there to go forward, then I would support the government in their decision to do so.
And would you support the government if they decided to overturn the project, such as they did with Gateway?
Well, I think you've seen in the past that my colleagues and I, all 32 of us, would have an opportunity to talk with the government and talk about the potential impacts that you mentioned, and depending on the circumstances of that time, the government will make that decision.
So the Atlantic Liberal Caucus would support Energy East in spite of a cabinet decision to overturn it?
I can't speak for what will happen in the future. What I'm telling you is that I support the process that's underway now.
So that's a definite I don't know on 3,700 jobs. I'll move on to a different report. 4 of your colleagues wrote a report called the Report of the Atlantic Growth Strategy Subcommittee on Innovation. And in it, they said that, I quote, 4 to 5 months can be a lifetime for business, especially especially a startup, following the approval of an application, this is talking about a COA, finalizing the related contribution agreement may take anywhere from 2 to 12 months, further impeding a business opportunity to execute successfully. Is it in your opinion that a COA minister from Mississauga is the best way to overcome this particular impediment to economic growth in Atlantic Canada?
With all due respect, Ms. Rambel, we are talking today about immigration. That is the area that I'm focused on. I think we have seen disruption of this committee and the way that the time for testimony has been used.
That's why
I'd really like to focus on immigration today.
And I realize that you might be testy over this, but you did point out at the front end of your comments that you acknowledge that there's a linkage between immigration retention and economic growth. ACOA is a vehicle, supposedly, to see economic growth in Atlantic Canada. So if your community and your colleagues are stating that the approvals process for ACOA grants is an impediment to economic growth, would you characterize the fact that the ACOA minister is now in Mississauga as an impediment to economic growth and ergo immigration retention?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. And actually, I would like to clarify. I believe what the report said was that that was one of the pieces of feedback that my colleagues heard during that report.
Actually, it's a determinate statement, and I just quoted it from the report.
I don't believe it is. No.
It actually says, and I quote, 4 to 5 months can be a lifetime for business, especially for a startup. Following the approval of an application, finalizing the related contribution agreement may take anywhere from 2 to 12 months, further impeding a business opportunities to execute successfully. Would you like to clarify your statement?
No, actually, what I would like to clarify is that ACOA has always been a vehicle for economic growth in Atlantic Canada. I think it will remain very important in the future. As I mentioned in my...
And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Tilson. Okay. Do you support having the ACOA minister and the delays that it's created as being a minister from Mississauga, Ontario?
I'm actually not going to qualify that question because it's putting all kinds of words in my mouth.
I turn it over to Mr. Tilson.
Tilson, 1 minute.
Mr. McKenna, New Brunswick used to have a program for post-secondary students that offered a tuition rebate for graduates that remained in the province for a certain period of time following graduation. The current government canceled that program as a cost-cutting measure. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but as a result of that, it appears that graduates have an even less incentive to remain in New Brunswick. Can you comment on that?
No, it's been a long time since I've been Premier, but
I'm sure you keep in touch.
I keep in touch, I keep in touch on the Energy East project, by the way, since I was one of the architects of it.
Mr. McKenna, don't veer off that.
Well, I can veer wherever I want in answering your question. And the answer is that, as my understanding, is part of a program of reducing tuition across the board that the government of New Brunswick made a change in that direction. But I want to amplify what I said and what Ray Ivany both believe is that the university community, however it's structured, needs to be part of the solution here because they've got a huge reservoir of international students, many of whom like our communities and would like to stay in our communities. And none of us are satisfied with the status quo at present. All of us want to see some improvement. So we're recommending some modest ideas as to how we could retain some of those people in our community.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Ms. Kwan, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank all the witnesses for their presentations. I have a number of issues that I want to touch on, but let me just begin with this. We've heard from previous panels about the importance of immigration and what immigration can do to strengthen the economy of communities. And of course, we've also heard about the issue around how there are limitations with respect to that as well. Now, I am actually a firm believer that immigration actually can help build a nation. In fact, immigration did build our nation, and I'm very proud of it, given that this is our 150th anniversary. So to that end, with respect to the Atlantic provinces, so there are some measures in place with respect to that. And so I guess my first question to the witnesses is this. Would you agree then that we should actually open up immigration even more? Right now, as it stands, we actually have a limit on our levels plan. At 300,000. And the government's own expert panel that they consulted, they were recommending 450,000. So I'm wondering whether or not you would agree that we should actually open that up beyond 300,000. If I could just get a quick answer from the witnesses, and I would start with you, Ms. Lockhart.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kwan. And actually, we're fortunate in Atlantic Canada that we have had an opportunity through the pilot program to invite 2,000 additional applications. And those applications will allow families to come with any newcomers that do come to the Atlantic provinces. So we have a mechanism right now, which I think it's it's a good way to test whether or not that works and what the economic impact will be. If you consider 2,000 people...
Sorry, can I just sort of cut in there? Do you agree that our levels plan should be increased beyond 300,000?
I think it needs to be a balanced approach.
Is that a yes or is that a no?
Well,
Sorry, I'm confused, so if you can just clarify for me.
Sure. I think it needs to be done properly, and if done properly, there may be an opportunity to increase those levels.
Mr. McKenna?
Yeah. I've looked at your previous testimony, and I'm appreciative of your support for our particular plight in Atlantic Canada, and I'm supportive of your statement as well. I don't have the same strictures as elected members on this, but I think that increased immigration would be good for our country.
Thank you. And coming to the video conferencing for Mr. Ivany.
Yes, thank you. My only proviso on that is a robust analysis of receptor capacity, because I think it clearly does us no good if we increase the level and don't have the capacity to settle those individuals. But with that caveat, my view is similar to Mr. McKenna's.
Thank you. I'll move on to another quick question. So we do have the Atlantic Growth Strategy. It just struck me as odd from that committee or that body, the leadership committee. We do have the premier of the 4 provinces and 5 members of the federal cabinet. Mr. McKenna, you raised the issue around immigration as a key piece, as well as temporary foreign workers. Yet none of those cabinet ministers are at that table. So it just strike me as odd and strange. And so whether or not you think that there should be an amendment in terms of that representation, because these are key questions. If they're not at that table driving the issue, and I've been a cabinet before, you got to drive the issues to make a thing happen. Otherwise, it ain't going to happen. And then related to temporary foreign workers, shouldn't we actually move beyond temporary foreign workers, Mr. McKenna, as you say, for those returning people who comes in year after year? They're not temporary. Let's be real. And let's just call them for what they are, permanent residents. Should we not actually create a pathway immediately with respect to that?
Yeah, on your last point, I agree that we should be creating a pathway. People who have spent years working in our communities are probably the low-hanging fruit in terms of people we can attract and retain. So yes, on that. On your first point, I'm not sure that I completely understand. We have 4 cabinet ministers as part of the Atlantic Growth Strategy. They're all at the federal cabinet table, and as a result of their work, they were able to get this Atlantic Pilot Initiative, which gives us 2,000 more immigrants than we didn't have a year ago.
Yeah, I guess my point about that is just that the immigration minister is not at that table, and neither is the minister responsible for the temporary foreign workers program, which seems to me are certain, pretty key components.
You mean to be part of the Atlantic Growth Table?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
No,
of that leadership committee.
It's an interesting point. I know
yeah.
I just know because I've been a little bit a part of it, that the Minister of Immigration in previous iterations has been at the meetings of the Atlantic premiers and Atlantic ministers on a regular basis, because they believe, I believe, we all believe that the cornerstone of our progress is going to be on immigration, on that immigration file. So whether they're sitting formally at the table, they are present at the meetings.
Thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to actually raise another issue. I'd like to move a motion, if I may. And Mr. Chair, and to the committee, the witnesses, there are many, many issues that are before us that are critical, and there are some issues where people have died, and I've not been able to move this committee to even have a debate about it, let alone study the issue. So no disrespect to what's going on here. This is really important work, and I want to do this work. But I also want to move this motion as well, that pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee immediately undertake a study on the current situation regarding the Immigration and Refugee Board, the IRB. Given its current funding constraints, its increasing case backlog of 1,000 cases per month, its current situation of over 60 board members' vacancies, and the significant increase in asylum claims to Canada in 2017, that the study should be comprised of no less than 3 meetings, that the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship be in attendance for at least 1 meeting, and that the chair of the IRB in attendance for for at least one meeting, and that the study be concluded, and that the committee report its findings to the House, and that due to the urgency of the situation, that these meetings take place prior to June 23rd, 2017. Mr. Chair, this motion has been tabled in my name, and to that end, I would really like it if we can get the committee members to vote on this motion. And the reason why I raised this, we're just talking about immigration at the moment, and we just heard also from Mr. McKenna about the importance of that, and citing, for example, the refugee community and their contributions in strengthening the economy of the communities as well. And so yet we have a situation where the IRB is really stuck. They're unable to process cases. They don't have the resources to do so, and we have a bit of a challenge before our hands. And also with the situation that we have in the broader community, we actually recently had a death that occurred with people trying to cross over to Canada. So, this motion is, in my view, is a very important one. We need to actually get on with a study on it in a timely fashion. That's not to say that the study that we're engaging in right now is not important. Of course, it is important, but I think the urgency in terms of life and death issues should be something that we should take a look at in this committee, and most urgently. So I do apologize to the witnesses that are here with respect to this work that's being done today. Now, the committee, in my view, has a responsibility to examine pressing issues in a timely fashion. And as we have seen now, and as I was mentioning, lives are at stake when it comes to these issues, as the government side continues to refuse to resume debate on my motion to study irregular border crossings. Now, Mr. Chair, by the end of 2015, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, noted that on average, 24 people were forced to flee their home due to war and persecution every minute. A total of 65.3 million people were displaced at the end of 2015. That compared to 59.5 million just a year earlier. This was the first time in the organization's history.
Point of order.
To those distractors, I want to respond simply, don't attack this Atlantic Canada study in your attempt to glorify your position or politicize your future. We have a study here. We have witnesses who traveled very far, and I think this is very undemocratic of you. I think it's very impolite and very rude.
Mr. Sarai, unfortunately, that is not a point of order. Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would welcome the debate from committee members about this motion. I would really, really welcome it. And I would love to hear from committee members who will say that there is no urgency with respect to this and the motion that I'm putting forward. So I would love to hear that debate. So with that...
This was important. It must be done. This is ridiculous.
Order. No. Ms. Rimpel.
On a point of order of decorum, I believe that you have ruled that my colleague has the floor and should be able to speak unimpeded.
Yes, Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this was the first time in the organization's history that some 60 million people have been crossed and marks the highest number of displaced persons since World War II. Of the 7.4 billion people in the world, 1 in every 113 globally is now either an asylum seeker, internally displaced person, or a refugee. And it is in this unprecedented level of forced displacement that we must examine our systems. In May of this year, I had the pleasure of meeting with the chair of the IRB, Mario Dion. Mr. Dion was proud of the work being undertaken by the IRB, but was also aware of its limitations. During the incredibly informative meeting, the chair explained to me several new efficiencies increasing measures. This includes the creation of a new process referred to as a short hearing process. Under this new process, Refugee Protection Division claims from individuals from a country of origin that has a claim acceptance rate of 80% or higher will be considered for inclusion in this new process. The rationale behind this process is that following a 90-minute hearing, an IRB member can, on the majority of cases, determine that the claim is genuine and should be accepted. The shorter hearing will allow the obvious cases to be cleared through the system faster. Should the IRB member have any doubt in the claim will move back into the standard hearing process. This ensures the integrity of the system is maintained. This is what I've been advised by the chair of the IRB. I was also informed that the expansion of countries eligible for the IRB's expedited process, established in its current form a couple of years ago, the expedited process allows for claims from select countries of origin to be processed without a hearing and only based on the paper submission. Originally, only claims from Syria, Iraq, and Eritrea were eligible for this process. As of June 2017, Afghanistan, Burundi, Egypt, and Yemen were added as eligible countries of origin to qualify for an expedited claim. Just like the short hearing process, if there is any doubt expressed by the RMB member regarding the submission, it will move to a full hearing to determine the authenticity of the claim. These measures will allow for the clearest cases of individuals needing access to Canada's asylum system to be processed more quickly and allow for more time and resources to be dedicated to less clear cases to ensure the system's integrity remains intact. Unfortunately, due to the government's unjustifiable silence on increasing asylum claims to Canada, especially inland claims stemming from irregular crossings from the U.S. into Canada, the growing trend of anti-immigrant and anti-refugee rhetoric has been allowed to grow and flourish unchecked. When the IRB announced these efficiency measures, mainstream editorial titles include, quote, "Liberals planning to rubber stamp potentially dangerous asylum seekers," end quote. I have been disappointed on far too many occasions at this point regarding the government's grandiose words on the international stage that receive no actions to back them up at home, which allow this misinformation to go unchallenged. So here we have two clear examples of the IRB increasing its efficiency levels. Mr. Dion also shared with me a graph showing the RPD's new system intake from 2013 to December 2016. I, of course, cannot table the graph here at the committee. Perhaps we can ask Mr. Dion to bring a version of the graph to this committee, a bilingual version, so we can actually examine that work and understand what it means and what the IRB is faced with and why we must resource the IRB in order to get this work done. If they are not successful in reducing the claims and dealing with the cases and creating a backlog of 1,000 a month, we have a problem with the integrity of our system, and that needs to be addressed. If we want to talk about immigration as it impacts the Atlantic provinces and how we need to move forward on that, we need to make sure that the IRB is resourced appropriately and so that they can do their job. Now, the graph was striking for two reasons, Mr. Chair. The first is that the significant steady increase in the number of cases finalized on a month-by-month basis by the RPD. In December of 2013, the RPD finalized about 700 cases. In December of 2016, they finalized about 1,200 cases. The trend line is clear. Even before these new initiatives, the IRB has been working hard to improve its case processing. Unfortunately, the second striking feature undercuts these efficiency increases. As I alluded to in my opening, we're currently seeing unprecedented numbers of forced displacement around the world. The result of this is a serious increase in claim intake at the RPD. For example, in December 2013, the RPD had a new claim intake of about 900 cases. In December of 2016, there were 2,200 new cases. Mr. Dion made it clear to me that in no uncertain terms, no number of efficiencies can be undertaken by the IRB for the lack of funding and over 60 board member vacancies. They need more board members and additional resources to deal with the current global trends in forced displacement. The persistent and unjustifiable situation regarding legacy claims creates an additional series of problems for the IRB. Claims that were not finalized before the refugee determination system overhaul of 2012 are considered legacy claims. Since they're not subject to the statutory timelines for hearing dates that claims made after the overhaul these claims are constantly put off in order to increase the likelihood of statutory timeframes for new claims
Chair, I have a
being
point
met.
of order.
Mr. Anandasangari.
Sure, I believe we're here for the Atlantic Canada study. I know we have guests here. We have a very important former premier here, and I believe it's respectful for us to bring in a motion. I think we'll be more than willing to discuss it at a further point, but I think it's really a waste of enormous time. I don't know if we'll ever get a chance to speak to the Premier again, and I think it's important that we hear from them. There's a very important study for Atlantic Canada, and I think it's important that we recognize that we can't be disrespecting every witness that comes in.
Mr. Anandasangari, you're getting into debate there unless you can reference the standing order that you are using for your particular point of order. I will pass the floor back. I will rule you out of order, and I will pass the floor back to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to take a moment to address this issue. I get it that we have guests here. I get it that there's important work done, and it is being done. We have set aside 10 meetings for this study. There are also other pressing issues as well. And, Mr. Chair, I know that committee members don't want to acknowledge this, but the fact is, if the IRB is not functioning properly, it undermines our entire system. It undermines the integrity of our immigration system. And right now, in my view, we have a major problem. The IRB has 1,000 cases of new backlogs in their processing time, 1,000 cases a month. So we're talking about wanting people to get to the Atlantic provinces to support the economy, and we want to do all of that work. I don't know how we can actually facilitate that if the IRB is stuck in this situation. We just heard from Mr. McKenna talking about the value of the refugee community going to the Atlantic provinces and how that is actually welcome. Well, if we want to make sure that that process is well in place, we need to make sure that the IRB is able to manage these issues effectively and efficiently. And right now, it is not. And so there is urgency to this motion. We need to deal with it. Otherwise, everything else falls apart. So that's why I'm doing this, Mr. Chair. And so I want to get back to my point about the situation that the IRB is faced with. They actually are dealing with legacy claims. The minister told the IRB to say, deal with the legacy claims, and then they didn't actually give them any resources to do it. So there are approximately 5,500 legacy claims left, and that means that there are roughly 5,500, sorry, I think I said 55,000, 5,500 refugee claimants who have been waiting in limbo since 2012, not knowing what their life is going to be like, where they're supposed to go, where they're supposed to fit. They do not know right now, and they have been stuck in this situation since 2012. And in no way, I think we can all agree, is this somehow acceptable. But that is the reality right now for these individuals, and the government has chosen not to give any resources to the IRB to process these claims. So a lack of political will has led to these individuals' claims for asylum here to be treated at best as second-class requests. And Mr. Dion was clear in the 2016-17 report on plans and priorities when he stated, and I quote, "The IRB has reallocated available internal funding to reduce the backlog of legacy cases from 32,000 to 6,500 since the coming into force of the new refugee determination system. In 2016-17, the board's ability to reallocate funding internally will be severely limited, particularly if the board is faced with sustained increases in intake at the RPD. As a result, commitments made by the board in relation to refugee protection claims that are not subject to statutory timeframes, such as the remaining 65 legacy claims, will have to be revisited unless additional temporary funding is made available," end quote. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, that request was ignored. Instead, the IRB has once again been forced to reallocate money internally, further straining their budget. Recently, the IRB announced the creation of the Legacy Claim Task Force. By dedicating $3 million per year for 2 years and 25 FTE board members, the IRB hopes to finally eliminate this ongoing injustice. So that means it's $3 million taken out of another area that the IRB is trying to deal with, because there were no new monies allocated to them under Budget 2017. Mr. Dion explained that the 25 board members would be some of the most experienced members he had. While it would be great to eliminate the legacy cases, this will also undoubtedly impact the operations of the IRB moving forward.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, I just would like to speak quickly on a point of order. I would just like to raise my disappointment in this committee's inability to function in a proper manner. I happen to sit on 2 standing committees myself, and I think that, for myself, having the opportunity to sit on 2 high-functioning committees, it's very unfortunate that we're going to disregard all the relevant testimony that we could potentially hear today due to this intervention from my honourable colleague. And I recognize her passion for the subject matter, but ultimately, this is not the time and place to raise this issue.
Mr. Harvey, you have entered into debate, and as I said previously,
our meeting.
Unless you can reference a standing order that has been breached, your point of order is out of order. And
I would just like to say, though, Mr. Chair, as an Atlantic Canadian and as a member of Parliament from another riding in this country, I find it very disheartening.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I will turn the floor back to Ms. Kwan. But, Ms. Kwan, just before you begin, if I could ask your indulgence for 1 minute, I would like to thank the witnesses, and I'd like to dismiss the witnesses. I know that some have traveled from afar. I know the video conference, the link will expire on us momentarily. So I'd like to thank the witnesses for their insights, for their testimony, and we certainly look forward to hearing any additional insights that you can provide the committee. Thank you on behalf of all the committee members. The witnesses are dismissed, and the floor is once again yours, Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As I say, if our immigration system is being undermined, and it is right now with the IRB being under-resourced so that they can process the claims efficiently and without creating a backlog, we are not doing anybody a favor, including the Atlantic provinces, who need immigration and our immigration system to work effectively, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, what is clear is that the IRB is doing everything that it can. And as Mr. Dion explained, they need resources and the board members to meet the demands being placed on the system.
Order, please. I understand that some people are catching up, but please, if we could do it outside of the committee room. Thank you. Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours.
They currently are not able to meet the demand, and as my meeting with Mr. Dion in May, the IRB had a backlog of 24,000 cases. Let me just repeat that so committee members can hear this and hear this clearly. There is a backlog of 24,000 cases right now at the IRB. That backlog increases by 1,000 cases per month. Again, let me just repeat that so everyone is clear with the situation that the IRB is faced with. That backlog is increased by 1,000 cases a month. For various reasons, only 50% of the cases are actually heard within the statutory time frame. The IRB is financially stressed. No efficiencies can make up for this. And at this very committee, I questioned the minister about legacy claims and the need for resources at the IRB. He acknowledged this when he stated, and I quote, "I think the approach should be efficiencies plus resources," end quote. Well, it's clear that efficiencies are, in fact, being made. What's unfortunately clear is that the minister isn't holding up his end and providing the necessary resources. To make matters worse, just yesterday, actually, in fact, yes, it was just yesterday, The IRB was, quote, adequately funded in response to a question I asked to the minister. What prompted this change in opinion? Did the minister misspeak? Is he serious when he actually said that the IRB is actually being adequately funded? We actually had the chair of the IRB say otherwise, and they have a backlog of 24,000 cases sitting right now in their docket. With each month, each passing month, another 1,000 cases added to that. Under what universe does the minister think that's adequately resourcing the IRB? Honestly. And you have legacy cases. People's lives are stuck in limbo for years on end without knowing they can have permanent residence here or not. I don't know about you. If you were stuck in that situation and you don't know what your future looks like, each day will seem like a year to you. And these individuals have been stuck in that situation for year after year after year after year. And with the kind of increases that we see in terms of backlogs, 1,000 cases a month, we're going to create a brand new category of legacy cases under this government. Funding hasn't changed, and in fact, what we know is that internal funding has been reallocated, increasing stresses on the system. To echo the serious concerns of the other opposition members of the committee, we need the minister to appear before this committee so that we can ask him these questions. This is a clear and significant change in view on the funding of the IRB, and members of this committee deserve to know what brought it about. The longer the government fails to even acknowledge the issues present in the system, the more the integrity of the system is put at risk. In a time of unprecedented global force displacements and growing anti-immigrant and anti-refugee rhetoric, this is something Canada simply cannot afford to allow to happen. Yet here we are, even this committee is refusing to acknowledge issues in the system, continuing to vote against even debating my study motion on the irregular border crossings. The committee members say that I'm disrupting the committee and the work of the committee. I do not understand why committee members can't even vote on a simple motion. I put a motion on the table. Give us an answer. Do you agree that we should study the crisis, the near crisis situation that's happening with irregular crossings? The committee members won't own up to it. They would delay the debate and they won't actually answer their question.
This is an irrelevant to the actual discussion at bar. Okay, so I don't believe that.
Sorry.
The member is entitled to make fair points relating to her motion, but this is weaving into another motion altogether. So we're not debating two motions. We're just debating the motion that's before us.
Yes, we're getting into debate once again. Ms. Rempel, you said a point of order.
Since the point of order on relevancy has been raised, as a member of the committee listening to Ms. Kwan, I'm actually finding her case showing how the committee has not been able to pass motions as relevant to her argument on why this motion should be passed. So it's the opinion of me that, as a committee member, that her argument is relevant. I would love to hear her continue.
We're into debate once again, so let's get back to Ms. Kwan. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll tell you exactly how the issue around irregular crossings tie into the work of the IRB, because those claims need to be processed by the IRB. And if the IRB doesn't have the resources to do it, they cannot do that work effectively. And we do have a crisis. A woman just died trying to cross over from the United States here to Canada. We can stick our heads in the sand and ignore that this is a real issue, but lives are at stake. And the work of the IRB is absolutely critical, Mr. Chair, and they need to be funded to do that work. That's how it is relevant, Mr. Chair. The issue of irregular crossings and the increased levels of inland refugee claims stemming from this are contributing to the current stresses of the IRB. Let us be very clear about that. In case people don't understand how that process works, there is a direct link with the IRB. Like other claims, inland asylum claims are subject to statutory timeframes for their hearings to be heard, and they are contributing to the backlog. If you don't resource it, it will will happen. Backlogs will occur, and that is what is happening. Since the Trump administration took office, there's been a significant spike in asylum seekers crossing from the U.S. into Canada at irregular and unauthorized border crossings. From January to April 2017, 2,719 individuals have been apprehended by Canadian authorities crossing in this manner. In all of 2016, a total of 2,464 individuals were apprehended. If this trend continues, we could expect over 8,000 such interceptions this year, over triple the amount from 2016. Imagine what that impact would be like for the IRB. If we don't get them resourced to process these cases, what will happen to us? How are we going to ensure that the integrity of our immigration system is protected? We cannot afford to let this happen. It is public knowledge that the RCMP and CBSA budgets in the communities most impacted by these crossings are being stretched. And what might be the biggest impact, the failure of the government to even acknowledge this, is that it undermines the Canadians' faith in our system, and at this time, we cannot afford to allow for this to happen. The argument that irregular border crossings allow asylum seekers to, quote, cheat the system, and that's what some people are saying, Mr. Chair, or say that, quote, jump the queue. This is absolutely false. Inland refugee claimants are included in a specific category in the annual immigration levels plan. The Government of Canada has a settlement target of 15,000 protected persons in Canada, the category under which inland refugee claimants fall into. In addition to the 25,000 spots reserved for government-assisted, privately sponsored, and blended visa office-referred refugees, any refugees who arrive in Canada by irregular border crossings will not take away a settlement opportunity for a refugee attempting to come to Canada by traditional channels. Similarly, inland refugee claims are processed according to their own statutory timeline and will not contribute to backlog in other refugee claims. But that said, each stream will have backlogs if the IRB is not resourced appropriately, and that should not happen. The notion that
Mr.
irregular
Chair,
border crossings to claim...
If I may, Ms. Kwan, I think...
Is there a point of order?
I believe we've heard enough, Mr. Chair. We've heard quite a bit from the member.
Is there a point of order?
We're in a position to vote on this.
Ms. Rempel, point of order.
Just because this has come up several times, Mr. Chair. I'd note that on Bosch and O'Brien, page 1052, the standing order reads that a member of committee may move a motion at any time in the normal course of a meeting, provided that the notice period, if any, has been respected. There's a large list of other reasons why, but given that that is the standing order, and I believe that there has been appropriate notice given on this motion, I believe that my colleague is in order.
You're quite correct. Our colleague is in order. Ms. Kwan, you may proceed.
The notion that irregular border crossing to asylum claims is committing a crime is simply false, Mr. Chair. Canada is a statutory to the refugee conventions that allow for this to occur under international law. And for example, the UN Refugee Convention declares that, and I quote, the contracting states shall not impose penalties on account of the illegal entry or presence of refugees who coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom was threatened in the sense of Article 1, enter or are present in their territory without authorization, provided that they present themselves without delay to the authorities or show good cause for their illegal entry or presence. Canada signed this convention in 1969, Mr. Chair. The idea that the floodgates have been open and refugees are streaming across the border unchecked at the levels that the Canadian system can handle is also not true. However, this is an issue which needs to be addressed, though. The government can't just ignore it and pretend that we don't need to resource the IRB to deal with it effectively. The Prime Minister doesn't get to say and put out in social media that we welcome refugees and then not provide the necessary resources to do its work. And that is absolutely critical if we're going to honor the words of the Prime Minister. A failure to take any measures will continue to strain the resources of the impacted government agencies, increase backlogs, and undermine public confidence in our systems. If this becomes a crisis, it will be a crisis of our own doing. The problem is we're letting it become a bigger issue than it needs to be. We have now seen a death occur. A 57-year-old woman died of hypothermia attempting to make the dangerous crossing from the U.S. into Emerson, Manitoba. The death was entirely preventable. Unfortunately, despite grandiose words and tweets of welcoming, the government's response has been to largely ignore this. And when an actual response is issued, it's callous and filled with misinformation. Take the Minister of Public Safety, who said, and I quote, "It is important to follow the rules and cross the border in a legal and regular manner. People should not think that some back door or side door is a free ticket to get into the country," end quote. Mr. Chair, I believe most of us here today, as well as the Minister, know that comment is simply false. The woman didn't cross at my apologies, the woman couldn't cross at an unauthorized port of entry. Sorry, the woman couldn't cross at an authorized port of entry. She couldn't because of the Safe Third Country Agreement. The only way for her claim to have been heard was through an irregular crossing to make an inland refugee claim. I've been arguing since the dramatic shift in humanitarian policy in the U.S. following the election of Donald Trump, and that the Safe Third Country Agreement needed to be suspended. Immigration law experts and refugee advocate groups have long been calling for this to occur. Case in point, which highlights the great work the IRB can do when it has the funding and board member available to do so. On Christmas Eve of 2016, Saidu Mohammed, a Ghanaian asylum seeker whose refugee claim in the U.S. was denied, walked across the Canadian border into Emerson. Freezing temperatures left Mr. Mohammed badly frostbitten and cost him 8 fingers. On May 17th, the IRB accepted his asylum claim. Mr. Mohammed said his claim was rejected in the U.S. for similar reasons to those the Harvard Immigration Law Program, Canadian Immigration Law Scholars and Students, Humanitarian and Civil Liberties Association, and others have for repeatedly been calling for the Safe Third Country Agreement to be suspended. During his lengthy punitive immigration detention, he was unable to access counsel and adequately prepare for his hearing. Under our system, he was able to do so. The IRB, they do good work, and they need to be resourced to continue to do this good work. If they are not resourced to do so, backlogs will happen, and they are happening at the pace of 1,000 cases a month, on top of already a long, huge backlog of 24,000 cases. Mr. Mohammed could have made his claim without losing his fingers had the government suspended the Safe Third Country Agreement. The Minister of Immigration, in his answers to me, constantly uses the term orderly to describe things. In what way is having successful asylum claimants lose their fingers to frostbite orderly? In what way is having a woman die of hypothermia found in a ditch orderly? You know what is orderly: crossing at authorized port of entry and making an asylum claim. Because of the government's inaction, NGOs are continuing to step in and pick up the slack while they themselves are being underfunded by the government. I recently met with the Inland Refugee Society of BC. Inland Refugee Society of BC has been serving refugee claimants since 1984, and it is the primary organization providing emergency support and settlement needs such as orientation, information, referrals, and English classes to refugee claimants from their immediate arrival in Canada, and that would be for inland refugee claimants. They have seen an increase in arrivals in the last 2 years, and most particularly since January of this year. They've seen their caseload increase by 300% in comparison to the same time period last year. Their service has been stretched beyond capacity, and if the current rate of incoming refugee claimant continues, they will run out of funds for this fiscal year and will have to close their doors. As of May 2017, they've had to cut transit and housing assistance, and they can now only pay salaries for 2.5 staff and for the office space that they operate out of. And an immediate intervention is needed so that refugee claimants can continue receiving the settlement and integration support that they need. Without this support, refugee claimants end up in vulnerable situations, including being homeless, and the transition to self-sufficiency is delayed. Right now, the shelters are full in my community. They have 32 families in a motel that's being funded by Red Cross. The families are running out of food, and they are desperate for help. Inland Refugee Society of BC is struggling to stay afloat, and by the way, they do not receive 1 penny from the federal government to do this important work. Inland asylum seekers do not get welfare, and they have no access to support except through agencies like Inland Refugee Society of BC. Other settlement service agencies, including CBSA, are referring inland asylum seekers to Inland Refugee Society of BC. Worth noting is that
once again, look, we have a motion here. The motion is very specific. We're getting into a very elaborate conversation of refugee settlement agencies. That's a completely different conversation altogether. So, Mr. Chair, I do think that the debate needs to be on point, and on a number of occasions we're seeing the individual going out of point. So I do like to ask that you keep the discussion to the actual motion at bar.
You're raising a point of relevancy.
Relevance, yes.
Okay. I believe that at this point it is still relevant to the motion that was raised. Ms. Rempel, was it a point of order?
On that point of order, Mr. Chair, I'd like to reference the Speaker's ruling in the House of last week. I believe that there were several points of relevancy that were raised, and the Speaker made a point that a great degree of latitude is typically given to debaters, and then they find that typically at some point the person raising this will bring it around to it. I found Ms. Kwan's point relevant, but certainly in referencing the Speaker's ruling, I believe that her arguments are relevant.
Yes, and chairs typically do allow a certain amount of leeway to allow the member to make their point. Ms. Kwan, please continue.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I believe that my points are relevant, and I will tie this exactly for the member so that he can see it clearly as I see it. As I was saying, worth noting is that according to the Inland Refugee Society of BC, some 70% of the applications are successful in getting status. And also, with the lack of resources at the IRB, 50% of the cases are deferred and are not heard on time. What does that mean? That means that those families are stuck in limbo, and they rely on groups like the Inland Refugee Society of BC to support them. And without their case being heard, they cannot access any resources anywhere else. They cannot find work, and that is a major problem. And so this stuff is all tied together. I know that members are annoyed that somehow I'm talking about this. It is so very relevant to what we do. This is what we need to deal with. We need to make sure that our government, your government, collectively, that we address these issues so that our immigration system is not undermined.
Order, Mr. Chair.
The IRB at the moment is being undermined without the resources that they need,
Mr. Harvey,
Chair.
Point of order.
I guess I would just like to raise that my dissatisfaction with my honourable member's comments today in this motion specifically isn't centred around the motion itself or the content of the motion. It's more centred around the timeliness of the motion. I think it's very disconcerting that
Mr.
this
Harvey,
is being raised at this
Mr.
time.
Harvey, order.
It's such a vital time. You know, we're nearing the end of the session.
Mr. Harvey,
and,
order,
you know,
please.
Committees are working hard to try to get studies wrapped up.
Mr. Harvey, There is no point of order in what you've just stated, and I will return the floor to Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, it's trying. I have to say, it's a bit trying in this committee in terms of the approach that they undertake and how they don't want to look at the critical issues at hand. If members have been listening to actually what I've been saying, they will find exactly the relevancy to my motion. And what was my motion? Mr. Chair, let's just be clear about what the motion was. And let me just put that on the record for the members who might have missed it. That pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee immediately undertake a study on the current situation regarding the Immigration and Refugee Board, IRB, given its current funding constraints.
She's now repeating her statement, and I think there is a standing order in terms of repetition, and I don't believe we are here to hear repetition.
Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge I was annoyed.
But once again, there is a little bit of latitude that is allowed. Thank you for raising that.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Kwan, please continue. Repetition and relevance is very important, and please continue. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I was putting the motion back on the floor because I don't think any of the members actually heard what the motion was. They were questioning the relevancy of my arguments when my argument exactly backed up the reason why we need to have this immediate study, Mr. Chair.
Call to order, Ms. Kwan. If you'd like to continue, I believe you have speaking notes. If you'd like to continue, please do so. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so the relevancy of my statements related to the motion, which is to talk about the immediate need for a study so that the IRB, which is underfunded, is seeing a increase in backlog of 1,000 cases per month, that is current situation of over 60 board member vacancies, and the significant increase in asylum claims to Canada in 2017, that we cannot allow this to continue, and that we need to have the minister here, the officials here, and need this committee to look into this issue to see how we can address it. And the Inland Refugee Services...
I certainly hope there is a point of order this time.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to say that my annoyance is certainly not related to the relevance of her content to her motion. I think her relevance of her content is completely relevant to the motion she presented. I just wanted to state that I'm disconcerted with the timeliness of the motion.
So that's not a point of order. Thank you. Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, the members will actually get a chance to vote on this. I will be sure of that. I'm coming to an end of my comments about this, and committee members will know when I make comments like this is not to drag the time, but rather to make a clear point. And I hope that the members will understand that. And I will be looking forward to see how the committee members vote on this motion. This, as I was saying, Mr. Chair, contributes to the stress on the IRB and the NGOs like the Inland Refugee Society of BC. If hearings are delayed, claimants remain in the IRSBC system, and they simply don't have the capacity to deal with it because they don't get any funding. Refugee claimants are resilient and ready to integrate, but they are met with barriers that prolong their settlement and their reliance on social services. An increase in front-end support when refugee claimants are at their most vulnerable would ensure the efficient and successful settlement and transition of this population into Canadian society. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he tweeted, "Welcome to Canada," that these situations are entirely preventable? The government needs to take their head out of the sand and acknowledge that things need to be addressed. A great way to start this right here at this committee would be to support this motion to study this. We can study the trend at irregular crossings. We can study the changes that need to occur at the IRB. We can report our recommendations to the government. We can urge government action on this front, and our committee can be the place where all this starts. So I sincerely hope that the government members will support my motion today, Mr. Chair. And with that, I close, and I look forward to hearing the debate or comments from the committee members on the substance of my motion, and I look forward to an actual vote. Let's get on with it and get the work done. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Mr. Sarai, the floor is yours.
I move that the debate be now adjourned.
Case in point.
Okay. Yes. So, all those in favor?
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote.
The motion is that the debate be now adjourned.
No.
Mr.
It's a recorded vote.
He said the committee be adjourned.
The meeting?
No, that the debate be now adjourned.
You said committee, sir.
Oh, I didn't say committee. I said
Well,
debate.
I think you did. You said committee.
So both the clerk and analysts heard debate.
Well, I must be hearing things.
Probably are, sir.
I've referenced with our support staff here, and they all heard debate. So we will proceed with the vote.
The motion,
recorded vote.
The motion is that the debate be now adjourned. Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Yes.
Ms. Zarowich.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Tabara.
Yes.
Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
Ms. Rempel.
No.
Mr. Soroya.
No.
Mr. Tilson.
No.
Ms. Kwan.
No.
The motion passes. The debate is adjourned, and I will suspend for a couple of minutes to allow the next group of witnesses to assemble. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to thank the witnesses for their appearance today and for your patience. We have before us from the Association of Atlantic Universities, Peter Halpin, the Executive Director. Welcome. From the Canadian Federation of Students from Newfoundland and Labrador, Ms. Sophia Descalzi, the Chairperson. And from the Memorial University of Newfoundland, Natasha Clark, by video conference, and she's an international student advisor. Welcome to all, and I believe, Mr. Halpin, you'll be starting off. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to appear before the committee on a subject so important to the future of Atlantic Canada, the successful attraction and retention of new Canadians to our region. Again, I'm Peter Halpin, Executive Director of the Association of Atlantic Universities, the AAU. The AAU is an advocacy organization working on behalf of the presidents and students of the 16 universities in our region. Today I will share some data on the attraction and enrollment of international students, their social and cultural impact on our campuses, their regional economic impact, and their interest in staying in the region following graduation, which I think is very relevant to today's discussion. I will also address what universities are doing to position Atlantic Canada as an attractive education destination in the world, as well as our collective efforts to help improve receptivity toward hiring recent international student graduates. Over the past 10 years, enrollment of international students in our universities has increased by more than 100%. Today, there are more than 13,000 international students studying at Atlantic Canadian universities. These students represent nearly 20% of total full-time university enrollment in Atlantic Canada. As the region's domestic population continues its steady decline, the value of international students to institutional sustainability grows in importance. Atlantic Canada's universities are talent magnets and the best source of new immigrants to the region. And our universities are working harder than ever on marketing the region and our institutions to international students as a welcoming education destination in the world. With the assistance of ACOA's International Business Development Program, the AAU has led an international student digital marketing research study on behalf of the region's post-secondary education sector. The results of that study will equip our universities and colleges with actionable information about key international target markets and their cultural nuances, who to target within those markets, and when, where, and how to engage student prospects. Currently, over 150 countries are represented on our campuses. That cultural and ethnic mix has a profoundly positive impact on the educational and social experience of the entire university community. By way of example, St. Mary's University in Halifax is considered the most international university in Canada, with visa students representing close to 35% of the total student body. Having more than 13,000 international students in the region also has a significant economic impact. In 2009-10, international students generated $565 million of economic activity across the region. The Council of Atlantic Ministers of Education and Training, CAMET, is currently updating that study with results expected this fall. In 2016, the AAU conducted a graduate retention study among our graduating university and community college students across the region. That research produced an astonishing result. 75% of those international students who participated in the research indicated they would remain in their province of study following graduation if given the opportunity to do so. 75%. In order of importance, those students rated quality of life in Atlantic Canada most highly, and closely followed by job opportunities as the major factors which would encourage them to stay. With the generous support of ACOA and its Atlantic Policy Research Initiative program, the AAU is now doing a follow-up study with those international students who responded to the 2016 study to determine what has happened in their lives 1 year following graduation. And we expect those results at the end of June. Our university leaders believe we have an important role to play in attracting more international students to the region, and we are also committed to working collaboratively with governments, the private sector, and others to help retain those students, the future professionals, entrepreneurs, and citizens we so badly need to populate our region. On July 10th, the AAU will host the Atlantic Leaders Summit in Halifax. It will bring together academic, business, community, student, government, and political leaders to examine the barriers affecting retention of international student graduates in Atlantic Canada. The summit features the Honorable Ahmed Hussein, Minister, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, as keynote speaker. The Minister will address the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project, as well as the immigration pillar of the Atlantic Growth Strategy. So in summary, the AAU is committed to interinstitutional collaboration to better position Atlantic Canada and our universities as an education destination in the world. We are also working collaboratively with other key players to retain as many of our international student graduates as possible in communities right across the region. So again, thank you very much for your invitation to appear before the committee today, and I look forward to your questions and the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halpin. Ms. Descalzi, the floor is yours. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. I am the chairperson-elect for the Canadian Federation of Students in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our federation represents over 600 post-secondary students across Canada on 80 different campuses, including all post-secondary students in Newfoundland and Labrador. Private members' motion M39 asks you to investigate the issue of immigration to Atlantic Canada. Among other things, it asks you to consider the challenges of retaining new immigrants and possible recommendations of how to increase immigration to Atlantic Canada. Research tells us that Atlantic Canada needs more immigrants, and international students are an ideal audience for new citizens. But for that to happen, we must end discriminatory practices at the federal and provincial level. At the federal level, we need more certainty for existing pathways to Canadian citizenship. At the provincial level, we must end discriminatory practices in overseas recruitment, tuition fees, public health care coverages, and employment standards. If we treat international students with respect and not cash cows for budget cuts, they can help Atlantic Canada meet the challenges of our aging society. I speak as an international student. I am from Ecuador and recently graduated with a major in psychology and a minor in French at Memorial University Grenfell campus. I wanted to come to Canada for numerous reasons. There was a political unrest in my country, universities are mostly privatized, and employers tend to hire people with degrees from other universities outside the country. However, I didn't have the opportunity to study abroad since my mother widowed when I was 11 years old, and we had been struggling economically ever since. A recruiter from Memorial University came to my high school and told me about Memorial's theater program and the tuition freeze for all students. When I was offered a scholarship from Memorial University covering my first year's tuition, I headed north. But I didn't realize how my years here will be filled with anxiety and fear. For example, it wasn't until I arrived at Grenfell campus that I was told I could not minor in theater, despite numerous communications with my academic advisor beforehand. That was not an auspicious beginning to my time here in Canada. Since 2014, I have had long conversations with my mother about whether I could continue my studies since the tuition freeze for international students was threatened. no Ecuadorian university would have accepted my credits due to the difference in language. So it would have been 2 years gone down the drain if that tuition was increased. Memorial University's new ancillary fees are driving international students away because many of us simply cannot afford an extra $600 per year. Immigration rules dictate we can only work part-time, so we cannot even take another job to try to compensate. Meanwhile, we are the ones who use the campus food bank the most. We're already struggling to get by. We cannot eat proper meals, let alone when these new fees come into effect. Memorial's university tuition fee hikes scheduled for 2021 are also driving prospective students away, and I know this from my own family. I've had cousins who wanted to come to Memorial University but cannot afford the added costs. They cannot apply to government loans from either country if they chose to come to Canada. Therefore, they will have to remain in Ecuador in order to avail of that option. Private loans aren't great either, since the interest rates are so high. My cousins are now considering to go to countries like Germany or staying in Ecuador. Moreover, nobody told me that in Cornerbrook, the transit system doesn't circulate on weekends or evenings, which were the only times I could buy my groceries. The recruiter didn't tell me that I couldn't find a job off campus until I stopped telling people I was from Ecuador, and that even many employers wouldn't hire me because my accent was too thick. My summers were full of anguish too. Even though I am very grateful to live in one of the provinces that provides healthcare to international students, I always fear summer term when spring term courses were over and my medical care plan expired. There were no useful courses for my degree being offered at that time, so I couldn't renew my medical care because I was not enrolled in any course. And I could not go back to Ecuador because I couldn't afford it. I was strapped, working to save money for next semester while hoping nothing will happen to me because I was not medically insured. Despite the obstacles, I have made my life in the province, and I want to stay. But I also know that it is incredibly difficult to migrate to Newfoundland and Labrador given the current conditions. Members of the committee, that's just my story. But I'm not alone. Hundreds of thousands of international students have these problems on a daily basis. And those problems must end if we want them to stay and help build our communities. I am honored to have been chosen by my colleagues to be a public voice for the renewal of our post-secondary sector. And we do have ideas to ensure international students are treated with respect. Thanks again for the invitation to be here. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Descalzi. Ms. Clark, the floor is yours, 7 minutes.
We can't hear her.
We cannot hear the witness.
Can she hear us?
Can you hear us? Wave.
She can.
Okay. Ms. Clark, could you say a few words? No, we still can't hear you. A little technical difficulty there. Ms. Clark, could you try saying a few words? No? Okay. It appears we have some technical difficulties. We'll return to Ms. Clark when those are resolved, and we'll begin with a round of questions. We'll begin with Mr. O'Regan. 5 minutes, please.
And first of all, Ms. Clark, because I know you can hear me, I apologize greatly that we are going to miss your verbal contribution, but we will, I'm only guesting here on the committee, but I'm sure this committee of good-hearted individuals will ensure that your input is given at some point. So, Mr. Scalzi, maybe I'll begin with you and welcome here in front of this committee. And you spoke of some of the difficulties that you had as an international student at the university and some of the things that were wanting in terms of your welcome and you being able to, I guess, express yourself at your full abilities. Tell me about your experience now as an immigrant, as somebody who, you know, as we've heard from former Premier McKenna and from Ms. Lockhart before you, and all the members of Parliament from Atlantic Canada desperately want to have more of you in Atlantic Canada, and I think most Canadians do as well. That was certainly the expression given by the House of Commons, which unanimously supported this strategy. How do we draw more Sophias, and how do we retain them? So in other words, how do we make life easier for you so that you choose to stay in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador?
Thank you for the question. One of the things that I have mentioned is making a smoother transition from being an international student to a permanent residence, and those are the process that are involving to actually going through the application. For example, there are requirements in which we have to give bank statements of having $2,000 in our bank accounts. Myself, as an international student, I don't have $2,000 on my bank account. So how I'm gonna check that box, let's say. So I get and the uncertainty behind like which program to go through. There's diverse options, and there's not a lot of guidance as to how we have to approach that process. Mm-hmm. So it just seems that international students try to do everything right. You know, we come here, we know the language, and still we have to go to a cumbersome and burdensome process to attain our permanent residency. And those application process really need to be revised. In terms of staying in Canada, in Atlantic Canada, we need to make sure that there's job options for new immigrants. We need to start building a culture when we are not afraid of someone who's not from here, that we don't discriminate based on the accent that we have or based on the color of our skin or our background.
Newfoundlanders should hardly be the people to be commenting on your accent, Mr. O'Regan. I apologize for that.
Mr. O'Regan, it appears that Ms. Clark may be online now, and I think you might have a question for her. Well, so let me just test this first. Ms. Clark, could you say a few words to us? No. So it appears that that's not the case. I had stopped the Clark.
Hang on. Ms. Clark, can you try that again?
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can. Right. And I had stopped the clock, so I will restart the clock when you're ready, Mr. O'Regan.
Okay. Well, it's unfortunate. Does Ms. Clark get any time to make a statement?
She does have 7 minutes, so we can either have the statement right now, and we will resume with your round of questions.
I defer to you, Mr. Chair.
I think it might be helpful in terms of molding some of the questions that you might have.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Clark, 7 minutes. The floor is yours.
Great. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me. I've worked as an international student advisor at Memorial University of Newfoundland since 2005. Since that time, Memorial has seen a significant increase in its international student population. In my years as an international student advisor, I've seen many students come and go. Some stay and most wish to stay. I've experienced the many changes within the Canadian immigration system, some that make this dream a reality and some that create barriers. To provide some background and context, Memorial University is the only university in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. The university was established as a memorial to the Newfoundlanders who lost their lives during the First and Second World Wars. Memorial is a multi-campus, multidisciplinary, public teaching research university. Memorial has more than 18,500 students and 5,200 faculty and staff spread across 4 campuses and nearly 85,000 alumni. As the only university in Newfoundland, Memorial has a special obligation to the people of the province, while at the same time striving to be a globally distinguished university and inclusive of students and scholars from all over the world. Memorial has 2,500 international students from over 80 countries. The international student population at Memorial forms approximately 13% of the student population and is growing. In my role as an international student advisor, I provide advice to international students on any aspect of their adaptation to the new country, culture, and legal system, with particular emphasis on immigration law. As a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, I field many questions from students about pathways to permanent residency. The Canadian Bureau for International Education conducts regular surveys of international student population in Canada. In their most recent survey, they cite that 51% of international students plan to apply for permanent residency. I experience this statistic daily in my work with international students. More than half of all my meetings with students on immigration issues involve questions about remaining in Canada after graduation and eligibility for permanent residency. I meet many students who qualify for the Federal Skilled Worker Program or Canadian Experience class, but do not score competitively on the comprehensive ranking system. I also encounter many students who wish to apply through the provincial nominee program, but face challenges in securing skilled employment in their field to qualify them for the program. Fortunately, our office benefits from a good working relationship with the provincial office's government Office of Immigration and Multiculturalism. The provincial government has identified international students as a desired pool of immigrants to the province and has designated a staff person who connects with students interested in staying here. This is an invaluable resource as it provides a point of contact for international students early on in their journey to permanent residency to provide them with labor market and immigration advice. Still, there are challenges, and the provincial government has addressed many of these in their immigration action plan going forward. International students formed a large part of the immigration strategy launched in 2008 and form a focus in the recently released Way Forward document on immigration in Newfoundland and Labrador, a 5-year action plan released in 2017. In this plan, the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador commits to continue to work closely with post-secondary institutions in the province to develop a program to assist international students in obtaining work placements and to explore new P&P categories related to entrepreneurship. The 5-year action plan is an ambitious one. The province aims to attract 1,700 immigrants by 2022. In 2014, the total number was 899. The Atlantic Growth Strategy, I believe, will go a long way to helping the province achieve this target. In giving consideration to the questions which are before the committee in their study on immigration to Atlantic Canada, I wish to share these thoughts. Firstly, as it relates to the challenges associated with an aging population and shrinking population base, for post-secondary institutions, this really means a shrinking pool of university applicants. And I believe it's important to maintain a focus on international student recruitment and the creation of an educational brand for Atlantic Canada. Secondly, as it relates to the retention of current residents and the challenges of retaining new immigrants, 2 major challenges facing international students are the lack of labor market opportunities and challenges to enter the labor market, the lack of pathways for international students to become permanent residents. Through the Canadian Experience class, and even with new changes to the comprehensive ranking system, an international graduate with a bachelor's degree and 1-year working experience in Canada does not necessarily score highly enough to be competitive in the express entry pool. Thirdly, in terms of possible recommendations on how to increase immigration to the region and address these challenges, I commend the Newfoundland government's plan to partner with employers to create placement opportunities for international students and to pilot a My First Newfoundland and Labrador job program for international graduates. I think it is important to focus on new pathways for permanent residency, particularly around entrepreneurship and low-skilled employment. I hear from many employers that they struggle to hire enough low-skilled employees, and this seems to be a real disconnect with the current immigration system, which really focuses on skilled migrants. I encounter many international students who are very entrepreneurial in nature, and our institution has various programs to support them in this realm. However, it is very difficult for them to immigrate as entrepreneurs. There is no provincial category for them, and there is, of course, on the federal level, the Startup Visa program. But it's challenging in this province as there's one recognized incubator company which incubates tech companies. Many of our students are looking to create small and medium-sized businesses, which would ultimately help the Newfoundland economy in creating jobs. There is little opportunity for them to immigrate. I have known several students who have sold their equity and ownership and essentially become an employee with the company in order to qualify to immigrate as a federal skilled worker. Of course, another reason why entrepreneurial categories I feel is so important is that in the absence of being able to find employment or in the face of an economic downturn or recession, many individuals turn to business startups, as a way for livelihood. Lastly, my analysis of the Atlantic immigration pilot initiatives associated with the Atlantic Growth Strategy is this. I do find the opportunity for AIPP for low-skilled immigrants
20 seconds, please.
Great. For international students, as many have entry-level positions in Category C, it's hard to find skilled work when they first graduate. The no work experience requirement is wonderful, as many of them don't necessarily have a great deal of experience. And I thank you very much for your time and opportunity to speak with the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Mr. O'Regan, you have 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
Ms. Clark, if you were going to find one other recommendation, what would it be? I mean, in your experience, when looking at the Atlantic Growth Strategy, the things we've done, but the things we hope to do, what would be something that you think would alleviate some pressure, perhaps attract more immigrants, and retain the ones that you meet and see?
I would suggest attracting would be looking at an entrepreneurship stream. Right? That if perhaps within the Atlantic immigration pilot, rather than a job offer through a designated employer, perhaps it would be linking them up with some, business development company or corporation, right, to help in assisting them to create the business. Because they're creating jobs as well in many cases.
They're the ones who create the jobs. Tell me, are there any misconceptions that you encounter from other people, I guess, about the potential of immigrants in the province, or is that dissipating in your view?
Well, certainly I think one challenge I spoke about was finding employment for many of our students. Particularly, we have various cooperative education programs, and it does pose a challenge for many international students to be competitive in those job markets. They come, from high school and from a culture where perhaps a lot of focus was placed on studies and on technical skills, and they're competing then with many Canadian students who, really just require, have worked through high school and have volunteered and developed those. So I see that as a barrier, and we have programs to help overcome that. We help to develop some of their professional skills and soft skills, and there's often misconceptions among employers as well in terms of what is needed to hire an international student. I mean, they're quite employable. Their study permit permits them to work. They can get a work permit upon graduation. So I think some knowledge around that area would be beneficial.
20 seconds.
Thank you. I wanted to apologize to all three of our guests, by the way, all three of our witnesses, for the abbreviated amount of time. But let the record show that when Atlantic Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador had its moment here before this committee, others decided to hijack it for other reasons. We're used to that. We're used to that. Note the date, note the time, take down the names. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Soroya, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your diligence in telling us what to do, what can be done. Question for Sophia. Sophia, I heard over and over in Toronto from the students, the fee is too high. Fee, I'm told, is 3 times more than the regular guys. Can't find work, and sometimes they work for food. Sometimes they work $5 an hour cash under the table. Have you ever seen anything like this? Question goes to you, or anybody else can jump in here.
Differential fees are, in my opinion, the first barrier to be able to come and immigrate to Atlantic Canada. As an international student, I can say that's it's very unfair, and it just shows that there's really no respect for international students who want to come here and start their lives, because we have those differential fees, because we pay 3.5 times more, because we can only work part-time. We are the biggest users of food banks. As a matter of fact, 60% of the bags were given to international students. So I cannot speak precisely of anyone getting paid cash and not having a contract, but I can definitely speak to the fact that international students are living under in very struggling conditions. We are not wealthy. We have to break that myth that international students are wealthy. We are not. We come here to escape different climates in our own countries and to make our lives here. And we need to equalize all students across the board if we're meant to stay here.
Ms. Clark, would you have anything to add on to it?
No, I don't.
What we question for you or Peter, what do we need to do to keep those people come to the East Coast, they stay in East Coast? I have personally seen over the years, they come to Saskatchewan, they get a phone number for the Saskatchewan, they got a post box number, and they move up to Toronto. Obviously, something is disconnect with the people coming to the country and the people they're supposed to stay in. What would you suggest what the federal government or the provincial government should do to keep those people back where they're supposed to do? Either it's Atlanta, Canada, or any other country. What we need to do to make it right? Yes, Peter,
sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think the situation for international students isn't too much different than domestic students when they graduate from post-secondary education. Their number one mission is employment. So finding that job or having the opportunity to begin a career, especially in a field that's commensurate with their studies, is critically important. And that's why I had mentioned our Atlantic Leaders Summit. We are going to focus on that issue because we need to determine what are the barriers that are keeping employers from not hiring international students, not to the degree we would like to see. And what are the barriers, and Sophia did a great job of outlining some of the challenges that international students face, not only while they're going to school, but when they graduate. So we really need to examine those issues very deeply. And as I had mentioned in my remarks, it's all about collaboration, and that's one thing that we do very well in our region. And I think that there's a concerted effort at the present time through the Atlantic Growth Strategy to really focus on that key issue, that one of the pillars is immigration, and what is it we can do to be more welcoming to new Canadians and do a better job of retaining our international students.
Sophia, how many students you know who are qualified and who they did find a job in their field, number one, or any jobs?
Yeah, it is a very unrealistic expectation for international students to graduate and then find a position that is related to their field and on a managerial position because that's one of the requisites to apply for permanent residency. And that I know of, I cannot really testify. Like, people try to find links between their programs and their new jobs.
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up. Ms. Kwan, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for their presentations. Just on the issue around foreign students, because I think that is an important piece with respect to increasing immigration levels. And I'm wondering, so aside from the issue around high tuition fees, which is a major barrier, as I understand from you, Ms. DeCassie, what do you think what do you think should be done around that piece? And then second, in terms of the current immigration policies as it stands for foreign students, international students, do you think is sufficient in terms of the changes? There's some point system changes and so on. Is that sufficient to retain the international students, or do you think more should be done? And if you think more should be done, what do you think should be done?
Thank you for your questions. I think the answer to the first one is very simple. You should just eliminate differential fees for international students, and universities have to stop increasing fees that are completely unregulated in forms of ancillary fees or any sort of fee for international or for any student, actually. So that's one. And the second one is, no, it's not sufficient. I think that we should be striving for improving those applications and forms and those processes. And there should be some sort of fast track for international students, given that they're already here, they already know the language, they have already assimilated with the culture. So the point system is very confusing. Myself, I'm going through it, and I'm having a lot of trouble. So maybe explaining it better, that also will be helpful.
Yeah, there was a point in time, was a process where international students could actually make an application right off the bat into the permanent residence approach. But right now, they actually have to compete amongst each other and also with other people who are applying to the system. And so by doing that, this so-called express entry system actually created major barriers, because you first have to be qualified to be selected from the pool to make an application for permanent residence based on the point system. So that actually hampers the system. Should the express entry system, some have said to me, should actually be eliminated. It actually does not help the system. It's anything but express. So I wonder if you can comment on that quickly.
I am not very familiarized on all the points or the history of entry systems, but I can definitely assure that we can improve it to make it easier for international students to stay here.
Anyone else on the express entry system? Because right now that process hampers people from actually getting into the pool. You have to be selected first to enter into the pool, so you don't actually get to make a permanent residence application right off the top. And so if we're talking about wanting to retain students and to get them right into the system right off the top, shouldn't they actually be allowed to make a permanent residence application right off the top? I mean, there is that saying, if you're good enough to work, you're good enough to stay. If you're good enough to study, you're good enough to stay.
Mr. Halpin?
Yes.
I'd like to comment.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Ms. Clark.
Go ahead, Natasha.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I also feel that it's not sufficient. I think the changes certainly have helped, but I don't think they go far enough to helping international students, and there needs to be more pathways for permanent residency. Particularly when we look at the post-grad work permit program, it's dependent on the length of your program of study. Those doing 2 years or longer programs benefit greatly from a 3-year permit. Those doing less than that 1-year programs get a 1-year postgraduate work permit. And there is an increasing trend in higher education for 1-year master's programs, and I believe that these individuals are just as desirable and qualified for permanent residency as those who, conduct a 4-year program. But they then have to squeeze within that 1-year postgrad work permit, that 1-year Canadian experience, and then also score and rank highly within the comprehensive ranking system. The Canadian experience class, when it was introduced, existed outside of express entry. That's right. And then with the, addition of express entry and the points, being over 480 to get in, I mean, it was really, really difficult. I don't think they had many Canadian express entry, Canadian experience class applicants through express entry because, they were going to federal skilled workers, they were going for nominees, they were going to job
20
offers
seconds.
to provide an MIA exemption. So I don't think that Canadian experience class has lived up to what people had hoped it would. I think there was challenges in the beginning, and with express entry, I think there's still challenges there.
Thank you. I'll just close with this, Mr. Chair. Just first to say, we actually need to make sure that the immigration system is integrity is not being undermined, and hence my IRB motion. We need to actually get on with it if we want to make the system work for every single province, including the Atlantic provinces.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by just acknowledging the not the closing remarks from Ms. Kwan, but the remarks just before that around good enough to work, good enough to stay, and good enough to study, good enough to stay. And I think I completely agree with her on the premise of those remarks, and I agreed with a lot of the line of her questioning. I'd like to start by talking with you, Mr. Halpin, and I guess what I'm wondering is, could you elaborate on the true potential that lies in Atlantic Canada by utilizing our international students better and better equipping them to transition into the economy once they're postgraduate in Atlantic Canada?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking it. Through the research that we've done among international students, one thing we've learned is that they really enjoy going to school in our region. And we have very unique universities, among the oldest in the country. And we have many smaller liberal arts resident school universities. And I think by and large, international students really enjoy the welcome they receive. I know Sophia sort of suggested it wasn't that great, but I think by and large, international students do enjoy the Atlantic Canadian hospitality and warmth and sincerity of the people. And I think that they, from what I've learned, they appreciate the safety and security of our campuses and our communities. And I think overall they have a great student experience. And it's not without difficulties. You know, we have to recognize that it has to be a great challenge to come from another part of the world and to go to school in a distant part of the world. As I mentioned earlier, I think the key to our success around retention is this collaboration between all levels of government, the private sector, and our post-secondary education sector. And there's no doubt in my mind that the timing for this has never been better. I've never seen the will to succeed in this regard greater than it currently is in our region. And this is a topic that is high on everyone's agenda at the present time. So I think right now, the timing has never been better for us to develop a collaborative approach to do a better job of making it easier for Sophia and other international students from across the region to stay.
Yeah, I know previously in my capacities in the private sector, I know for myself, I used to tell HR with the company I was working with that I didn't care where they got me the employees, but I said, I just want you to get me the best. And I don't really care where they come from. And I would still believe that would be true if I were in the private sector, because that's what's best for the business that I'm working on behalf of. It's what's best for the community, and it's what's best for the province as a whole. I think I went to school in Nova Scotia at Dalhousie's agricultural campus, and at that time, that's been a dozen years or so ago now. But there were some inequities that were created just by the grouping of international students at that time. Within that campus, and I think they've made great strides in trying to address those issues. And I can see how international students, they need the camaraderie of other international students, but they also need the acceptance of the student body as a whole. And Ms. Descalzi, I'm sorry if that's not perfect.
That is good.
I first want to remark on your incredible English, which I think is far better than my Atlantic Canadian English, which is not very good. But what are regardless of federal government, provincial government, private sector, quickly, what are some tools that you think would better equip you as a student or other students to transition into the workforce?
Well, if we are not talking about provincial and federal government, I guess...
They can be provincial or federal.
Oh, okay, sorry, then I didn't understand the question. I guess that providing more certainty into their status here. I guess I keep repeating myself, but it's just very important for students to also have healthcare coverage in all provinces and not being expired every 4 months, because that's really hindering our performance in our studies and in our livelihoods. So treating us with respect as much as you would treat another Canadian, and not saying utilizing students, because that's a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, our meeting concludes. I'd like to thank the witnesses for their submissions, their testimony, and your patience. And I know I speak on behalf of all of our committee members, and particularly to you, Ms. Descalzi, that you embody the character traits and values that we expect from immigrants that come to Canada. I know that in the coming years, Newfoundland, Labrador, and in fact Canada will benefit from students like yourselves immigrating to our country. Thank you so much, and with that, the meeting's adjourned.